My brother was killed because of a Netflix show. That is the ugliest, stupidest sentence I have ever written, and every time I say it out loud, people think I am joking, or trying to be dramatic, or looking for somebody easy to blame. I wish that was all it was. I wish I was the kind of man who needed a villain simple enough to fit into one sentence. The truth is uglier than that. It is smaller, pettier, and somehow even more cruel. My brother died because a stupid man watched Breaking Bad and came away from it thinking Walter White was not a warning, but a business plan. His name was Daniel. He was my older brother by 6 years, and for most of my life, he was the person I measured other men against. Not because he was perfect. He was not. He could be arrogant, impatient, and had a talent for choosing the worst possible moment to make a joke. But when we were kids, he was the one who made every place feel survivable. If our dad was in one of his moods, Dan could make me laugh with a face pulled behind his back. If I got cornered by bigger boys at school, Dan seemed to appear from nowhere. He had that way about him. He carried himself like somebody who could take a hit and stay standing. And when you are younger than that kind of person, you think they must be indestructible. Maybe he thought so too. He met a woman called Leah when he was 27, and for a while, I thought that was it for him. That was the making of him. She was good for him. She steadied him. They rented a flat together, got a dog, talked about holidays in places neither of them could really afford yet. He stopped drifting from job to job. He started planning. Not dreaming, planning. There is a difference. Dreams are easy. Plans ask something from you. Then, like it so often does, it all came apart slowly and then all at once. I never got the full story of why they split. I heard his version, and I heard hers once, years later by accident, when I bumped into her in a supermarket and she looked at me with this old guilty sadness that told me she still carried some piece of it. From what I gathered, it was not one thing. It was money. It was his temper. It was her being tired of making excuses for him. It was him feeling judged every time she tried to help. It was the sort of ending that starts long before anybody says the words. When Leah left, something in Dan gave way. Not dramatically at first. It was not smashing windows and screaming in the street. It was quieter than that. He stopped answering calls, stopped shaving, started drinking hard, lost his job, borrowed money and never paid it back. He made stupid friends because stupid friends ask less of you. One bad night turned into another, and then into a version of his life where every bad decision made the next one easier. The actual charge that sent him to prison was burglary. He and 2 others broke into a warehouse thinking there were electronics stored there. There were not. The place had been mostly emptied, and a security guard caught them inside. Nobody was hurt, thank God, but there were tools found in their car, and one of the other men was carrying a knife. Dan swore he did not know about that. Maybe he was telling the truth. By then it hardly mattered. He had the record, the drink, the wrong company, the look of a man already halfway condemned in the eyes of the court. He did a few years. Visiting him was one of the strangest experiences of my life because prison did not seem to make him harder in the way I expected. If anything, it ground him down first, and then, in the last year, sharpened him into someone quieter and more honest. He started reading. He joined every course they offered. Anger management, addiction support, job readiness, whatever they had. The first year inside, he was furious with the world. The second year, he was mostly furious with himself. By the end, he had become almost careful. That was the word I kept coming back to. Careful. He told me once, through the plastic chair scrape and the vending machine hum in the visitors' hall. I think this is the first time in my life I've had to sit in a room and be exactly who I am. No excuses. No running off. No girlfriend to fix it. No pub. No gear. No pretending. Just me. And I'm not saying I like the bastard, but at least I know him now. That was my brother when he came out. Not fixed, because people are not washing machines, but clearer. Softer in some places, harder in better ones. He knew he had made a ruin of things, and for the first time, he seemed willing to build from the rubble instead of curse it. Part of his release conditions meant he had to spend 12 months in a halfway house. It was an old converted place on the edge of town, a broad Victorian building that had once probably belonged to a family with servants and money and now smelled of boiled vegetables, detergent, and old heating pipes. There were 8 residents in total, men at different stages of release, all trying in theory to find work, stay clean, obey curfews, and convince the system they could be trusted not to slide straight back into the holes they had come out of. Dan hated the loss of privacy, but accepted it. It's a year, he told me. I can do a year standing on my head. He got a part-time job washing dishes at a hotel. He was saving. He talked about maybe doing some training in plumbing once the year was up. He sounded tired, but hopeful. And hope on him looked fragile, like something newly healed. Then there was the man in the room next door. I only met him once. His name was Curtis. He had a twitchy, bright-eyed intensity about him, like he was always half a sentence ahead of himself. He was younger than Dan, maybe late 20s, in for petty drug offenses. Possession, dealing, that sort of thing. He had not come out of prison humbled. He had come out offended. The world, according to Curtis, had constantly failed to recognize his potential. Every setback was somebody else's fault. Every consequence was bad luck. He talked a lot about the game and real money in a way that made me tired within minutes. Dan called him a moron, but not with real hatred. More with the exhausted contempt of a man forced to share a landing with a bad smell. Apparently Curtis had become obsessed with Breaking Bad inside. He had watched it over and over, according to Dan, like it was scripture. Only he seemed to have watched a completely different show from everybody else, because what he took from it was not the rot, or the ego, or the destruction. He took from it this lunatic fantasy that chemistry plus courage equaled wealth, that there were fortunes waiting for any man bold enough to ignore the rules. He talked about meth, the way idiots talk about cryptocurrency or day trading or any other thing they think will lift them instantly out of ordinary life. Not as work, not as poison, as a shortcut, Dan told me once, laughing in disbelief. He genuinely thinks the reason nobody's done it round here is because everybody else is too thick to see the opportunity. I said he should tell staff. He shrugged. Tell them what? That he talks shit? Half the house talks shit. He's all mouth. I think about that a lot. That sentence. He's all mouth. People always think the signs before a disaster will arrange themselves neatly in hindsight, bright and obvious. They do not. Most of the time, they look exactly like the 100 stupid things people do without consequence every day. What I know of the final night came from the inquest, from newspapers, from the statements of 2 survivors, and from the details I wish I could scrub out of my head. Curtis had been ordering chemicals off the dark web for weeks. Not the proper stuff, not lab grade, not anything remotely controlled or safe. Mystery solvents, fertilizer derivatives, stripped-down compounds sold by anonymous accounts to buyers too greedy or too ignorant to care. He had smuggled pieces of equipment in bit by bit. Glassware, tubing, heating plates. He kept it hidden in bags under his bed and in the wardrobe, in a halfway house, in a building full of men sleeping 3 feet from each other, in a building with old pipes and a gas line that, according to the report, should have been replaced years before. Late that night, after curfew, he decided to cook a batch in his room. Maybe he thought everyone else was asleep. Maybe he thought he was a genius. Maybe he was high. I do not know. No one living could tell us. And I am not sure I would trust the answer anyway. One of the survivors said there was a smell first. Not smoke. Something sharp and artificial, like bleach mixed with petrol. Another resident banged on Curtis's door and told him to knock it off with whatever he was doing. Curtis shouted back something about minding his own business. A few minutes later, there was a flash under the doorframe, bright enough to turn the corridor white. The first explosion came from the room itself. A bad chemical reaction, rapid heat, pressure, shattered glass. That was enough to throw Curtis into the opposite wall and blast the door off its hinges. But that was not what killed most of them. The blast ignited the gas. When the line went, the house did not so much burn as open. That is how the fire investigator described it in one article I could never stop rereading. The structure experienced catastrophic internal overpressure. Such clean, dead words for what they mean. Flame moving through walls, floors lifting, windows becoming knives. Men dragged from sleep into fire before they even understood they were dying. 8 people died. My brother was one of them. Sometimes I imagine his last moments, and sometimes I try with everything I have not to. Did he wake to the smell? Did he hear the first blast and sit up? Did he have time to stand? To think not again? Not after all this? Or was it mercifully fast? The kind of violence that erases thought before fear can fully arrive. I hope for the second. I fear the first. The papers loved the story for a week. There was something in it that pleased them. The irony, the stupidity, the little moral package of it all. Ex-con in halfway house killed by amateur meth cook, inspired by television drama. Easy headline, easy disgust, easy laughter. If you were rotten enough. What those stories did not capture was this. My brother had done the hard part. He had already gone into the dark and turned back. He had paid for what he did. He had come out determined to live smaller, straighter, quieter. He was not chasing glamour. He was washing dishes, attending meetings, saving notes in a jar, trying to become the sort of man who could one day be boring in peace. He died because he happened to be sleeping on the other side of a wall from a fool who thought fiction was instruction. So yes, my brother was killed because of a Netflix show. Not really, not literally, not in the way lawyers or clever people would allow. He was killed by chemicals, by negligence, by a crumbling house, by a criminal idiot with a God complex and no sense. But I still come back to that first ugly sentence because it captures the madness of it. That this huge, singular life, this man I loved and lost and still miss in stupid little daily ways, was ended by somebody too thick to understand the difference between tragedy and aspiration. That is the part I cannot forgive. Not that Curtis was evil, though maybe he was. Not that the system housed vulnerable men in a place that could go up like tinder. Not even that luck was cruel, because luck always is. It is that my brother finally learned how to live and died because the man next door learned absolutely nothing at all.
I still remember the smell before anything else. It's strange what sticks with you, what lingers long after the faces blur and the rooms you once lived in collapse into vague, shifting shapes. But that smell, it never quite leaves. Even now, years later, it sometimes creeps into my dreams, thick and sweet and wrong, like something rotting behind a wall. There were 4 of us in that house, fresh out of university, clinging to the illusion that we were adults. The place was cheap. Too cheap, really. But none of us cared. It was a narrow, 3-story terrace with damp creeping up the walls and floorboards that sighed under your weight. The landlord never fixed anything unless it was on fire. I had the box room at the back. Jamie and Luke shared the big front bedroom. And then there was Aaron. Aaron had the attic. He moved in about a week after the rest of us, quietly, without much introduction. I remember the first time I saw him, thin, pale, with hair that looked like it had never quite decided what direction to grow in. He carried only 2 bags and avoided eye contact like it was something dangerous. "All right," Jamie had said, offering a hand. Aaron just nodded and slipped past him, heading straight upstairs. That was about as social as he ever got. At first, we didn't think much of it. Everyone has their quirks. We were all trying to figure things out, jobs, routines, what it meant to exist outside of lectures and deadlines. Aaron kept to himself, rarely used the kitchen, and we barely heard him moving around. If anything, it was convenient, less competition for the bathroom. But then the smell started. It wasn't immediate, just a faint, sour note in the hallway at first. Easy to dismiss. Old house, we told ourselves. Probably damp or bad plumbing. Luke joked that something had died in the walls, and we laughed it off. Except it got worse. Over the next couple of weeks it deepened, grew heavier. It was no longer something you could ignore. It clung to your clothes, settled in your throat. Sometimes it seemed strongest on the stairs leading up to the attic, like it was seeping down from above. We mentioned it to each other in passing at first. "Smell that?" Jamie said one evening, wrinkling his nose. "Yeah. It's grim," I replied. "Think it's the bins?" We checked. They were empty. We checked everything, drains, cupboards, even the garden. Nothing explained it. Except we all knew. No one said it outright, but we all knew where it was coming from. Aaron. He became harder to ignore after that. Before, he'd been like a ghost. Present but distant. Now everything about him felt off. We started noticing things we hadn't before. The way he'd creep down late at night, barefoot, barely making a sound. The way he'd take food from the fridge without acknowledging anyone, his eyes fixed somewhere over your shoulder. The way he smelled. God, the smell followed him. Not as strong as the one upstairs, but enough. A faint echo of it, like he carried a piece of it around with him. "Mate, he's not right," Luke said one night, after Aaron had passed through the kitchen without a word. Jamie nodded. "Something's going on up there." We laughed it off again, but it wasn't really laughter anymore. It was nervous. The real turning point came when the flies appeared. At first, just a couple. Then more. Black, fat-bodied things that buzzed lazily around the ceiling lights. They gathered near the top of the stairs, clustering in corners, crawling over the walls. I remember standing at the bottom of the staircase, looking up, watching them move. It felt like the house was trying to tell us something. We confronted him after that. Or tried to. Jamie caught him in the hallway one afternoon. "Hey, Aaron," he said, blocking his path. "We need to talk." Aaron stopped. Slowly, like the idea of stopping had to travel through him before his body obeyed. "It's about the smell," Jamie continued, "and the flies. It's getting bad, mate." Aaron blinked at him. "I don't smell anything," he said. His voice was flat. Not defensive, not apologetic, just empty. Jamie frowned. "Come on, you must—" "I don't smell anything," Aaron repeated, and then he stepped around him and went upstairs. That was it. No explanation, no argument, just denial. We called the landlord the next day. He wasn't happy. Not about the smell, not about the mention of flies, and definitely not about the implication that something might be wrong in the attic. He grumbled about exaggeration and young people making a fuss. But he came. I wish he hadn't. It was a grey afternoon when he arrived, the kind where the light feels thin and tired. The smell was worse than ever, so thick it made your eyes water. Even he couldn't ignore it. "Jesus," he muttered, pulling his collar up over his nose. "What the hell have you lot been doing?" "It's not us," Luke said quickly. "It's him. It's Aaron." The landlord scowled but didn't argue. He marched up the stairs, each step creaking loudly under his weight. We followed, reluctantly, like we were being pulled along by something we didn't understand. The flies grew thicker as we climbed. By the time we reached the attic door, they were everywhere, buzzing, crawling, forming a dark, shifting mass around the frame. The landlord hesitated. "Aaron!" he shouted, banging on the door. "Open this up!" No response. He knocked again, harder. "Aaron, I'm coming in if you don't open the door." Still nothing. He tried the handle, locked. He swore under his breath, then turned to us. "Stand back." I remember my heart pounding as he stepped back and kicked the door. Once, twice. On the third hit, the lock gave with a splintering crack, and the door swung open. The smell hit us like a physical force. It was overwhelming, thick, sweet, putrid. I gagged instantly, doubling over, my stomach lurching. Behind me, someone retched. But the worst part wasn't the smell. It was what we saw. Aaron was sitting on the bed. He didn't turn when we entered, didn't react at all. He just sat there, staring ahead, his posture strangely relaxed. And beside him, no, not beside him, in his arms. She was there. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was looking at. It tried to make sense of it, tried to turn it into something else. But there was no mistaking it. The body. A woman's body. Her skin was grey and mottled, stretched tight in some places, slipping in others. Her hair was matted, clinging to her face. Her eyes. I won't describe her eyes. Aaron was holding her like she was alive. One arm wrapped around her shoulders, the other resting gently against her side. His head leaned slightly towards hers, as if they were sharing a quiet moment. "Aaron," the landlord whispered. Aaron smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile. "She's sleeping," he said softly. No one moved, no one spoke. The flies buzzed louder, filling the silence. She was tired, he continued. We were playing and she fell, hit her head. But she's okay now. She just needs rest. My throat felt tight. I couldn't breathe properly. She doesn't like it when it's noisy, Aaron added, glancing at us for the first time. You'll wake her. The landlord staggered back, his face pale. Jesus Christ. Aaron's smile faded. Don't, he said, his voice suddenly sharp. Don't say that. He tightened his grip on the body. She's fine. There was something in his eyes then, something fragile and dangerous, like a thin layer of glass stretched over something much darker. She's fine, he repeated. I don't remember what happened next in any clear order. The landlord shouting, someone calling the police, the sound of sirens in the distance. I remember leaving the house. I remember standing outside, gulping in fresh air that didn't feel clean enough. And I remember looking up at the attic window. For just a moment, I thought I saw movement behind the glass. Two shapes, one leaning into the other. But that's not possible. Was it? They took Aaron away that day. We never went back inside. The landlord let us out of our contracts without a fight. I moved across the city within a week, trying to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. But distance doesn't erase things. Sometimes, late at night, I think about him. About the way he looked at her. Not with madness and not with horror, but with something disturbingly close to love. And sometimes, when the air is still and the world is quiet, I catch a faint, familiar smell. Sweet, rotting, wrong. And I can't help but wonder, how long had she really been sleeping?
It started with mud on the glass. That is still the detail that comes back to me first. More than the face, more than the smile, more than what happened after. Just the soft, wet smack of garden earth against my bedroom window at 2 a.m. Again and again, dragging me up out of sleep. I live in the back bedroom on the ground floor of a student house just off campus. It is the worst room in daylight and the worst room imaginable at night. The wallpaper's painted over in landlord magnolia, but bubbles where damp has got into it. There's always a smell of wet brick after it rains. My window looks straight onto the back garden, which sounds nice until you realize the garden is just a square of bad grass, a washing line, and a fence so warped it looks permanently in pain. Upstairs are the 2 other bedrooms. Katie has one, though saying she lives there feels generous. She spends most of her time at her boyfriend's place. When they are here, they go upstairs, shut the door, and vanish into whatever sealed little atmosphere couples create around themselves. The other room belongs to Jaden, an art history student with round glasses, careful hands, and the kind of face that always looks on the edge of apologizing. We got on well enough, but we were not close. He liked Byzantine icons and black coffee, and took notes in different colored inks. I liked football, takeaway, and not thinking too hard if I could help it. We shared a kitchen and a polite kind of friendship. Nothing about Jaden suggested the scene I saw that first night. The banging woke me just after 2 a.m. 3 hard knocks on the window. Then silence. Then another 2. I lay there disoriented, staring into the dark, trying to work out if I dreamed it. My room was thick with that half-sleep feeling where everything seemed staged somehow. Then another clump of something hit the glass. Smack. I sat up. My curtains were thin enough that the security light from next door turned them into a washed-out gray. I got out of bed, cold all over, and pulled one side back. Jaden was standing in the garden. He was barefoot in the wet grass, wearing what looked like pajama bottoms and a dark hoodie. His face was mostly in shadow, but I could see his arm dipping to the flower bed and then snapping forward. Another clod of mud burst against my window and slid down in a brown smear. I mouthed, "What the fuck?" He looked straight at me. Even from behind the glass, I could feel it. That exactness, like he'd been waiting for me to get up and catch him. Then, without expression, he turned, put one foot on the old plastic compost bin by the fence, hauled himself up, and disappeared over into the alley beyond. I stood there, with my heart battering away, expecting him to laugh, or come back, or for some explanation to present itself. None did. In the morning, I checked the garden. The flower bed under my window had been churned up. There were muddy footprints in the grass leading to the fence. Jaden was in the kitchen making toast. I nearly said something, but one look at him made me stop. He looked normal, annoyingly normal. Hair flattened on one side, mug in hand, asking if I wanted the last of the milk. I watched him over my cereal, trying to detect some hint of a joke. He did not mention the night before, and somehow that made it worse. I decided maybe he'd been drunk, or sleepwalking, or dared by some course mates. Student behavior always has some humiliating explanation available, if you give it time. The second night, I stayed awake. I put my desk chair by the window and sat there with the lamp off, phone in hand, feeling ridiculous. Midnight passed, then 1, then 1:45, and I started thinking I'd imagined it, or embellished it in the dark. At 2:07, something struck the glass. Then again, and again. This time I yanked the curtain open straight away. Jaden was closer to the window than before. Not in the middle of the garden now, but just a few feet away, standing almost beneath the sill. There was mud on his hoodie and on one side of his face. His head was tipped slightly forward, like a dog trying to understand a sound, and he was smiling. Not grinning, not laughing, smiling. His mouth stretched too wide, every tooth on show, the corners pulled back so hard it seemed painful. His eyes were open much too far. He did not blink. I know that for certain because I stood frozen for maybe 5 seconds, and in all that time, nothing in his face changed except the small movement of his chest. Then he raised his hand and tapped one muddy finger against the glass. I swore and stumbled back so fast I hit the bed frame. The noise that came out of me was not a shout, more like something dragged out by a hook. Rage hit a second later, hot and stupid, and easier to carry than fear. I ran out of my room, through the kitchen, and yanked open the back door. Cold air flooded in. The garden light snapped on. Jaden was already at the fence, one leg over. "Oi!" I shouted. "What the hell is wrong with you?" He twisted round to look at me. The smile was still there, huge and fixed. Then, very slowly, he drew one finger across his throat. A slit-throat gesture? After that, he pressed the same finger vertically to his lips. Shh! Then he dropped over the fence and was gone. I did not chase him. I tell myself now that was common sense. At the time, it felt like cowardice. I locked the back door, checked the windows twice, and sat on my bed until morning with every light on. The third day, I barely saw Katie. She breezed in to grab clothes and left again, saying something about staying at Aaron's. Jaden was around, though. He spent the afternoon at the dining table with books spread out, muttering dates and names under his breath. He looked tired, but then so did I. At 7:30 that evening, After too much pacing and not enough nerve, I confronted him in the kitchen. What were you doing in the garden the last 2 nights? He glanced up from rinsing a mug. What? Don't do that. Do what? I could hear how mad I sounded before I even finished speaking. Throwing mud at my window, standing outside my room in the middle of the night, making gestures at me. What the hell is your problem? He stared at me, genuinely blank. Then he laughed once, uncertainly, like I must be winding him up. I was asleep. Oh, brilliant, I said. So now I imagined you. Mate, I have no idea what you're talking about. His confusion was either perfect acting or real enough to chill me. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the blurry photo I'd managed to take through the curtain the second night. It was awful quality, mostly dark garden and reflected room. But there was enough there. A figure at the window, face pale and floating. Jaden squinted at it. The color left his face so subtly I only noticed because I was already looking for a reaction. That looks like me, he said quietly. It is you. No. He looked from the screen to me. I mean, it looks like me, but I was upstairs. I should have shouted again, should have accused him of taking the piss, but something in his voice stopped me. There was fear in it, real fear. Not for me, for himself. Come downstairs, I said. He followed me to my room. I remember stupid details. The way my floor creaked under his step. The dirty mug on my desk. The blue LED on my charger. We stood by the bed facing the window like we were waiting for a presentation to begin. See? I said, more weakly than I meant to. You're telling me you weren't stood there? Jaden swallowed. Why would I do that? Before I could answer, the banging started. Not a muddy slap this time. A violent, knuckled pounding that made the glass judder in its frame. 3 hits in quick succession, then another, close enough, hard enough, that the latch rattled. Neither of us moved. The curtain twitched inward with each blow, nudged by the trembling window behind it. Jaden whispered, Jesus, what the... Another crash. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I reached out and took one edge of the curtain. He took the other. For a second, we just stood there, connected by that thin fabric. 2 idiots in a student rental trying to pretend the world still worked. Then we pulled it back. Someone was standing outside my window. It was Jaden. Not like him in the vague, arguable way of the photo. It was him, exactly. Same glasses. Same dark sweatshirt. Same narrow shoulders and sharp chin. Except the thing outside wore his face like a person wearing a familiar mask. The smile was impossibly wide, splitting him from cheek to cheek. Mud caked his teeth. His eyes were so open the whites showed all the way round the irises. There was no confusion in that face. No uncertainty. None of the soft awkwardness of the real Jaden beside me. Just delight. A hideous, private delight. Beside me, the real Jaden made a sound so small I almost didn't hear it. What the fuck is going on? He whispered. The thing outside lifted one hand and pressed its palm flat to the glass. Its fingers were long, with mud under the nails. Slowly, carefully, it tapped once with the tip of one finger. The real Jaden stumbled backward. That's not me. I think some part of my mind broke neatly then, like a bone snapping under clean pressure. Because instead of panic, I felt a dead, lucid calm. I locked the window latch, though it was already locked. I backed toward the bedroom door. Jaden backed with me, never taking his eyes off the thing outside. It tilted its head. Then, With sudden force, it slammed its forehead into the window. The glass boomed. A crack veined across one corner. We ran. Out into the hall, into the kitchen, grabbing the back of chairs as we passed because balance had become uncertain, like the house was shifting. Jaden was shaking so hard he could barely hold his phone. I told him to call the police. He dropped it once, picked it up, dropped it again. From the bedroom came another smash. Not breaking. Not yet. Testing. As Jaden fumbled with the emergency number, I looked toward the back door and saw, through the small pane of wired glass, the garden beyond. Empty. Then a face rose slowly from the bottom of the pane until it was looking in at us. My face. Same eyes, same hair. Mashed flat on one side from sleep. Same old t-shirt. Only with that same vast smile stretched across it. Bloody now, where the lips had split. It lifted a hand, tapped the glass, and from upstairs, from Katie's room, there came a knock. 3 hard knocks, then another 2.